Hey y'all, welcome to episode 15 of Naked Talk podcast with unprocessedJESS. I am so excited about this episode today. I have my first guest on Naked Talk today, and we're also going live on my unprocessedJESS Facebook page. So if you're listening to the podcast, we will be going live on Facebook. And then you'll be able to hear the podcast episode on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Podcast, or wherever you get your podcast. And you can search for Naked Talk with unprocessedJESS there. So I shared in my last episode some of the changes that were going to happen, and this is one of them. And I also shared about really talking about around the Valentine's Day season. We're doing a series called Love Your Labia. So I thought it was important to, instead of focusing on relationships with others, first start on loving ourselves, because I don't know about you, but for me, I find it a lot easier to really thrive in a relationship when I have my own stuff together as far as how I feel. It hasn't always been that way, and I've shared a lot in the past, but I'm getting there, and I've seen a big difference. So we're kicking off the Love Your Labia series today with a special guest, and I will introduce her in a second. But I want to say, if you're new to the podcast or seeing this on Facebook Live, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. You can always go back and start at episode 1, and I share a little bit of my story there just to kind of give you some insight. But this goes back to why I started Naked Talk podcast in the first place. I really wanted to share authentically and candidly just some things I've been through, tragedies and good and bad things, what I've learned, and also just to let people know that they're not alone. I've really found that, at least for myself and others I've talked to, there's so much that people are struggling with, but they don't talk about it, and it's usually out of fear, guilt, or shame, or they just don't know where to go. So I thought, why not me? Let's just start it. And I've started meeting some really great women who are strong and supportive, and I'm really excited to share more of their stories with you as well. So before we do that, I just want to let you know that this episode is sponsored by Naughty Nutrition. So I found these girls while I was searching for some recipes, and I was like, hello, Naughty Nutrition, Naked Talk, like, I got to look into these girls. So what they do is they have, on their site, it's 90% nutrition, 10% chocolate, which I love, and 0% BS, which I love as well, because we don't have time for that, right? And they go on and they really have amazing recipes, and they just talk about food brands, and they have what's called Naughty Nutrition Approved, and they have the N5 diet. There's something they have that's over 125 recipes, and I know when I was starting back on my health journey about 8 years ago when I started blogging after discovering GMOs, it was so difficult, and sometimes I just thought, okay, I'm just going to go get fast food and be done with it. But it's important to learn how to read labels, and they have a tutorial on there, and they just have some really good stuff. I think the latest I saw on there was a chai spice apricot thumbprint cookie, gluten-free, vegan. Like, it's crazy. Yeah, like, really good. So check them out. You can I'll have, if you're listening on the podcast, I'll have my link on the show notes, and on Facebook we can put that in the comments. But yeah, check them out, and they make it fun. Kind of how I've approached these crazy topics is just to have fun with it. So Naughty Nutrition. So without further ado, I want to introduce, Ana Rojas Bastidas. So we originally met at Houston Latina Bloggers. It's a local group here in Houston. Amazing women I've met from there. And I was drawn to her right away because she is very vocal. Her shirt today says it all, body positive badass, and she definitely is. And so the more I got to know about her, the more I realized our visions are a lot and aligned with each other. So Ana, welcome to Naked Talk, and tell us a little bit more about yourself.
I am so very happy to be here. I was very excited when Jess and I were talking about on a very long drive, as her and I live very far away from the city. So her talking about this podcast, and I was just really excited for her. And so when she said, we're doing it, I said, yes. And I'm so happy to be the very first. I'm going to gloat about that for a very long time. But I started blogging almost 4 years ago to talk about my journey through body positivity, being a mom, because honestly, it was probably at my lowest that I gave myself a chance to say, you know what, maybe I am worth what I'm worth without, restrictions. So it was sort of like a last-ditch effort to love myself by just saying, okay, I know that I'm not supposed to go to the beach wearing a bikini because I have stretch marks and scars and loose skin. But what if I did? And what if I can have those fun memories that I see on TV? Because I have no other choice. It's either do that or not do it at all. And I did it, and it turned out great. And so I said, well, you know what? Maybe if other people are struggling through the same thing or trying to make that same decision, if I just simply share my story, it'll resonate with a couple of people. Yeah. It's ended up resonating with a lot more people than I realized. And so I've been blogging about that ever since. And it's connected me to a lot of incredible people, publicly and privately, because there's a lot more people that struggle than we realize, even in the business world. I talk to a lot of very successful women who struggle with their body image, and it impacts their ability to lead. And so it's a long narrative, and we're just in the throes of it. So I'm very excited to be here to continue the conversation, to talk about a really fun topic that we don't talk about enough, because it goes right back to that body shaming. And like you said, it lies somewhere in between shame and fear, and we deserve a lot better than that.
Yes, here. I agree. Yeah, and like you were saying, looking back now, I think a lot of times we can relate and say, when we're on the other side of something, right? Like, okay, that was so silly. We had those thoughts, but they're so real at the time, and they can be debilitating. And I remember I wouldn't wear shorts for the longest time. And it's hot, y'all. Like, we're in Houston, Texas. Like, it's hot. Come on now. And I really, it's not that I was even really overweight or anything. It's just something I felt, like I say in my, on my Facebook or my blog, like I lost myself in motherhood. It's not that it's a bad, motherhood is a bad thing or anything with my children, but I had lost myself. And I think a lot of times as women, especially, we're nurturers. So we will tend to push other people's needs up, and then next thing we know, we're like, oh, who am I and what do I even need? Sure. But an aunt of mine finally said, girl, you better wear those shorts. She's like, I'm 60 and I'm wearing my shorts because it's hot, and do whatever you want to do. And something just said, okay, that's silly. But at the time, it can be isolating. And I think more and more now that we have the ability to connect with women, we need women to stand up. And like you said, you were probably fine helping just one or two women, but there's so many out there. And that's why it's important to utilize the power of what we have. And I share a little bit about, I think it was episode 9, and it was my vulva and vaginas. I think it was vulvas, vaginas, and penises, oh my episode. And I just talk about...
Great alliteration.
Yes. I mean, and if you haven't listened to that one, you can go back. I believe it's episode 9. But I say a little bit about how, a lot of times as men, there's urinals, or they might see penises growing up and say, oh, like, this one's a little to the left and his is a different color than mine, or whatever. But we're not really going around being like, hey, what's the, we don't even know our body parts, right? Sure. So I used to call everything a vagina. And I've had kids, and I just thought it's all a vagina. But no, that's our vulva on the outside. I'm learning all kinds of stuff in my old age.
All right, anatomy.
Woo! Just turned 42 last year, and I think I learned what my vulva was at 41. But anyhow, I digress. But getting to know the body parts, right? And one, why do we not know our body parts? It just makes you think, why do we not know? This is your urethra. This is your vulva. This is your vagina.
And
Not
all of them
knowing
have
that.
different functions.
They all have different functions. But also that we're not seeing what they really look like.
Yeah.
And it's not something you're going to ask. And I share in that episode how I saw when I watched porn for the first time with a boyfriend in college, I was just freaked out because I saw the person on there and I'm like, what the heck? Like, that's not like mine. You know, so I'm in my early 20s and you're ashamed, I was anyway, of watching porn. So I wasn't going to even ask my best friend, like, hey, I saw this porn. And I wouldn't have known to say vulva, but her vagina didn't look like mine. So then it just leads to, you know, all kinds of things. And so if you're liking what you're hearing now and want to hear the rest,
stick around.
Stick around and you can go subscribe to Naked Talk podcast, Naked Talk with unprocessedJESS. The rest of it will be up tonight, sometime later this afternoon or tonight on nakedtalkpodcast.com. You can go there and you can find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Podcast, and subscribe so you're notified when new episodes come out, and then just binge to your heart's little desire, especially if you drive a lot like us, right, Anna?
Perfect.
I listen to podcasts on my way to the gym and all over the place. So, that's one of the things that I really, looking back, I realize it did affect.
Mm-hmm.
You're ashamed because it's already dirty, right? We don't talk about it, so it's dirty. And now my thing doesn't look this way. I never even asked my doctor. You know, it's like she's down there looking around, but I didn't think to say, hey, is this, you know, is it pretty or whatever? You know, it's just weird. But it affected my relationships as well.
Sure.
And for sure, not letting myself, you know, just fully go in those relationships intimately because I was self-conscious.
Sure.
So I didn't know if I wanted someone, you know, quite that close down there, you know. And I think, man, I missed out on a lot of good
opportunities.
A lot of good opportunities.
Yeah, good experiences.
So all that to say, back to the body positive badass, we need to just be a badass about it and be like, this is my vulva, my labia, and I love it. Mm-hmm. And if you've got a problem, then you don't deserve to be down there.
Yeah. Well, I think what you said is pretty interesting when we talk about what we know. So even when, like, I had to explain to my children because I have an 11-year-old and a 12-year-old. So finally she was like, no, really, like, where do babies come from? And while we continue to not go into great detail, and they were both there for my birth, which I was very excited for them to be there, I realized, okay, but anatomically we need to have this conversation because you need to understand a couple of things. And so it was the same conversation. It was like, okay, well, you know, you've got your anus, you've got your urethra, and you've got your vagina. Babies come out of your vagina because at the very least, if you don't know that fact, you think you're like peeing out your baby. And that's just very bizarre when you think about it. In school, you know, obviously this is something that was, because it is simply anatomy. But when it comes to women's anatomy, the whole conversation does change. And while we will see many phallic objects, we don't see any objects that are, that's, you know, unless it's inherently sexual.
Yes.
Whereas anything else can be referred to like a man's penis, and it could be something small, large, round, short, whatever it is. But you don't see that same conversation around women's private parts. And that doesn't make any sense because obviously there are objects in our world that would resemble the same anatomical features. And yeah, so it is a very big challenge. It is a lot of shame because, so if you don't talk about it, the message you're getting, kind of like with body positivity, it's the same thing. If you only see a certain type of woman being shown in a bikini, for example, no one is inherently saying, oh, and if you don't have this body, you're not allowed to. Well, except some advertisements, right? Yeah. They're saying you don't want to be caught in this body on the beach. Yeah. Join a gym, start this, you know, cleanse.
Cut everything out.
So in those instances, yes. But the absence of, the presence of something delivers that same message. Even in pornography, the message is you're there to please that man, and that man is going to please you whichever way, or woman is going to please you in whichever way they deem as necessary. When you see it, it's like the same thing, like over and over and over again. And to me, that's sort of like tiring. It's like, aren't you a little more creative than that? Because
we've seen the storyline again.
Yeah.
For decades.
Correct. Different costumes, different settings, but essentially it's the same stimulation. It's the same climaxing, but all done to the pace of the partner instead of the person receiving the pleasure. And if that's the only place where we're going to get any of this information, that not only are you ignorant of the information, then you're getting false information on top of that. So when do you figure it out? And when do you get to start enjoying yourself? Because like you said, who do you talk to about it? Hopefully you do have girlfriends or maybe your parent, not all of our parents, doctors. That's a good question. Who do you go to talk to, or just to find out just this real information about it not being tied to shame or making you afraid of having even asked, like, ew, why are you even asking? That's so gross. It's like,
oh, sorry.
My bad.
Yeah, or the reaction. And I'm going to have one of my old gynecologists on in a couple of weeks. And that, I think a lot of it starts with your doctor relationship. Yes, there's the things that we're concerned about, our pap smear, and is everything right down there. But then there's more to that. So maybe they're not going to give you sex advice, but at least they're saying, hey, maybe they can be proactive. Because looking back, I've never asked my doctor about anything.
Sure.
And I agree with you. If porn is the only thing, and then it's now I've heard, I don't know a lot about it, but I've heard there's like ethical porn. I'm not even sure what all that is, but I think it just means people are
consenting adults,
consenting and not drugged up. I don't know, but if that's your only source and it's distorted, like what I saw, then there's, where are you going to go? That's not a very scientific type of thing. And something too that was interesting, I think, we're not talking about it, growing up. You don't want to be, at least when I was growing up, I was like the good girl, and I thought, I'm not going to have sex till I get married because, you're not supposed to.
Sure.
Never would have masturbated because we were just really taught like that's wrong, even for boys. So didn't know like what felt good to my body. And then I wasn't planning on having sex until I got married. So then as I got older, I was like, ooh, I was 21 and I'm like, hey. So I had that sexual experience, but looking back, he probably didn't really know what he was doing and what was he seeing. So now in your head, you're like, oh, this is how sex is.
Yeah, sure.
But you're really just taking on, once again, you said those messages, it's to please the other person, right? So your own pleasure it's really kind of an afterthought. And so that's why I like that we're going to have these difficult conversations and capture two generations. So not just the women, us, right? But start those conversations with their children.
Sure. So
they can have that, not just say, I don't want them to be 40 and have lost themselves in motherhood like I did. To say, wait a minute, I love my life, I love my children, but they're not my whole life.
Correct.
But then you're left with, you really don't know what you want, right? So that's a whole learning process. So if we can capture those two generations and where the new generation is raised up being confident, that's one of what I'm passionate about. But like you said, just showing more. As you see more women that don't look one certain way, who even said that what that way is?
Correct.
And that makes you think, who said that?
And then why do we accept it so willingly and then perpetuate it, right? Like you just sort of keep it going, but you don't really stop to ask yourself, well, who is they? We say, oh, well, exactly. they say that I can't. Who is they? But more importantly, what are the actual consequences, right? So what happens if I do it? And of course, morally speaking, that's something that many people can't ignore, because now you're bringing in faith, religion,
Yes.
and all this other stuff. But I just do find it so interesting, having been on many spiritual retreats, being heavily involved in many different types of ministries. It still doesn't stop the curiosity. It still doesn't stop the physical urges, because those are things that are built in. So if you just try to ignore, you're just creating just someone who's ready to burst. And that's what you see happening. Unwanted pregnancies, for example. You're talking about 3 days out of the year out of the month that you can be fertile? Teach that. And then you would know. Yeah. But if you don't even understand how that functions, if you're experiencing pain during sex and you just think, oh, well, this is sex, I'm experiencing pain, sex must be painful because, anatomically speaking, I'm doing the thing that I'm supposed to be doing. But wait a minute, maybe you just need to try a different position. Maybe you need to see a doctor because there's actually an issue. So when I was pregnant, sex started becoming super painful, which is really upsetting, because the one time you want to be able to have unlimited amount of sex is while you're pregnant, because there's no consequences. And I had a prolapse. My bladder, because of my growing uterus, was pressing into my vagina, which is as painful as that sounds when you're having sex. And I have to be able to tell my husband that, because he would be petrified at the idea that he was hurting me. But in my mind, you say, oh, you have to just grit it and bear it, because I'm here to please my husband. And, well, if we don't have a sex life, then what's going to happen, and this and that. But by being able to have that conversation, we were also able to get creative, and we were able to explore different ways for both of us to be able to be satisfied sexually and keep that, healthy communication going. And then as soon as the baby was born, I thought, okay, cool, I'm done. I was not done, and it was still painful. And so I had to go see a urologist and continue to see my gynecologist. And some of them just said, listen, it's just your whole body, your whole insides have been rearranged. We need to wait and see how they come back. But they took me serious. It's not like they laughed and they're like, you'll be okay. They said, oh, let's see who you can see, what specialists. And they were very receptive. And I also then was very fortunate to have that experience from a doctor that didn't shame me in any way. But I do know people who have had shameful experiences when it comes to talking about their body and sex, especially if you're talking about maybe those who are overweight, because a lot of their health issues are just lose weight and you'll be fine. Just lose weight and you'll be fine. It's like, but wait a minute. There might be something else going on. Yes. Or someone culturally speaking will say, well, that's not what we do. So their pains aren't taken seriously. And like you said, well, then where am I? Then what do I deserve? Especially if you're talking specifically about your own sexual pleasures. Yeah, and something too that, and once again, this is crazy thinking back, here I am, I've had 3 kids, learning all this stuff at 40, started a couple years ago. Even something as simple as using a lubricant. Once again, I don't know why, that's just not something I really thought about. And I was listening to another podcast it's a doctor, she's on there, but she was saying too that a lot of people don't realize this, but as we age, as we go through hormones and all kinds of things, you might need a lubricant, and you can avoid all of that pain with something so simple. But once again, if you don't know that, let's get the information out there, and then you can say, oh, maybe I should try this. And I found a really good one. I think it's called Naked. So I bought it. It's just clean fun. Anything that has naked.
Anything
Jess
naked.
Will buy it. Just know this.
Yeah. So it's organic, so I think I've shared this before, but Naked Talk is kind of a play on words from my blog got started with less processed living. And I thought, oh, we could be real, be naked, and the more naked, the better. Cleaner, closer to nature. But, just having
how
something
nature
like
intended.
that. How nature intended. But like
sometimes
you
you need a little
said,
help.
it's a natural thing. So why are we making such a big deal about it?
Yeah, I mean, even the word lubricant, when people say that, oh,
like a
that's so
lube,
dirty.
it's like dirty. Like you got to go to the adult store. No, I got mine at Target.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
There is a whole section on that, but even month to month, you know, if you do natural family planning, which I think is really amazing, because that is an incredible way of like really getting to know your body. You know, they talk about your mucus and how liberated. You're liberated. How lubricated you are. All of that is a direct correlation with your fertility cycle and all of that. So you know when you're not fertile, your body's not like as gung-ho about reproducing. Yes. So it's like, but that's fine, because you can be like, it's cool because I got you. I've got my lubes. I don't need you to be on board because I'm on
prepared.
Board. And things like that. Your nutrition, you know, how hydrated you are, your stress levels, all of that impacts everything. And for some reason, we feel like everything doesn't include our private parts.
Right. And just that alone, our private parts.
Sure.
It's private. We don't talk about it. And I just thought about
vaginas,
that.
I'm going to say
vaginas and vulvas and all kinds of stuff. Penises, oh my. But that's something to really address, and to know that, once again, that goes back to, we'll just think about it later. You know, it's not your top priority. Well, I know, and I share this, and I think it's episode 2, Sex and Sleep, How to Get More of It. I know that, and like you said, with women in business and things too, you're more productive, you can be creative, you can take that leadership role kind of from the bedroom to the boardroom. I don't know how you want to say it, but when I'm really stressed, it feels good to be able to relax. And then, especially if it's a morning time, I've shared before in there, I think that was my Morning Mojo episode, if you've got little kids or you're off schedule with your work, get up early, set the alarm a little bit early, and start your morning off right and get to work, you know. I think I said on there, the early bird gets to squirm. Like, get your time in the morning, and then everyone will be happier because you're skipping to work and, you know, ready to face
you've got all this. I mean, when you think about the chemicals that are released, you've got all this oxytocin. So when you talk about being effective, the more oxytocin you have flowing around in your body, the more you have the ability to connect and empathize with others, which leaders in business, I mean, hello, that's what you really need, you know, to connect with your workers, to deliver your message. You're ready for stimulus. Literally, you're ready for stimulus, all kinds of stimulus.
And you're awake. And that's what we'll have to talk about later as it goes on, but I really want to talk about too, like, as women, having that emotional intelligence that I feel really is great for leadership, like you said, and just being intuitive and in tune. And when you're feeling good, it allows you to do that for someone else and in a different situation. And so this is really good stuff. But I wanted to say too, I want you to share, because you do all this other great stuff, but you touched a little bit on something that you've been working on. And I'm all about, just like you are, women entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs in general, because I know the struggle's real, like with all this stuff, and you want to do everything, and it's a lot. So share a little bit about that, because it kind of goes with, we'll kind of go from the vulva to the boobies, you know, the breast.
Also excellent source of stimulation. Well, it's funny because one of the things I try to talk about is just being your whole self all the time. You know, we often hear the expression, like, I want a lady who's, you know, a freak in the bed, but like a lady on the street, but a freak in the bed. I said that totally wrong.
Lady on the street, freak in the sheets.
And I'm like, I know the expression, and I've messed it up completely. And it's this idea that we have to be separate people, that we have the capacity to be separate people, but that we have to be compartmentalized, because that's not acceptable here and that's not acceptable there. Instead of saying, well, I'm not advocating for people to just like have sex on the street. What I'm advocating is there's something that requires something of you in order to have satisfying sex that can be applied to doing something in business, whether it's presenting a business plan or whether it's, you know, getting people together. you're not a compartmentalized person.
That's
and
right.
you have the capacity to take all of these elements and just continuously be you. Because if you have to keep shifting, that gets very confusing, right? Like, oh, am I being a slut right now, quote unquote, for the podcast people?
Yeah.
Am I being a slut right now? Or am I being a badass bitch right now? Or am I being, it's like, oh my gosh, just be you.
And now you picked up your kids and now you're the good mom,
Yeah,
PTO mom now.
Exactly. Now I'm the Pinterest mom.
And I've done that for years. That's what I'm saying. It's exhausting.
Yeah.
And you don't know who you really are.
And you're really not as you're not as effective as you think. So my two worlds have finally collided. Whereas all this talk about body positivity and entrepreneurship is just simply seeing a problem as it exists and finding a solution for it. So I'm all about the bikinis and the swimsuits. And last year I had my baby, my JJ, and he, I was able to breastfeed with him successfully. And when the summer came around, I was going out with my two older ones. They were at the water park. I had no choice. Public breastfeeding was something very scary for me. For all the confidence that I had in the world, I'm like, oh, there's always something that just makes you feel so ashamed and worried and nervous. And I said, nope, but my kids, they want to go to the water park. So we got the season passes to the water park, and I had JJ with me. So I'm just going to do it and it'll be fine. And I have tons of bathing suits. And Target, if you're looking for a sponsor, it's me. And but every time I tried to like feed him, it was just uncomfortable. And when I was going on vacation, I said, I'm just going to buy myself one. I'm going to buy myself a breastfeeding bikini because I want to treat myself. This is obviously a journey that's going to take me on, at least 1 year to 2 years if we're lucky. And I'm just going to buy one. Going on vacation, it'll be great. And I was shocked, although I shouldn't have been, that there were 0 breastfeeding-friendly bikinis available. Yeah. So my mind started churning, and I was like, how can this be? And of course, the answer is very simple. We don't think of mothers in bikinis.
Exactly.
We are a country that just recently made public breastfeeding legal in all 50 states. You have legislation that just passed, I think in Alabama, that lawmakers can breastfeed their children on the House floor. We have such a long way to go. So why would anybody create a product that specifically is for breastfeeding in public? And of course, body image issues that women have, they think, well, I can't wear one. And usually when we design products, we design it for what we will use. And nobody in their right mind would have a baby and start a business. Except for me. Except for me. I'm doing it. So we have 2 prototypes. Orole has been firmly established, and I'm very excited to be offering breastfeeding-friendly bikinis. And there's a one piece for those that need to transition a little bit as well. Okay. And I'm very excited about that because it's something that when you say it, people are like, what? That doesn't exist? But don't realize all the reasons why it doesn't and what we need to do to actively change that, because breastfeeding is a public health issue. And if you've got all these world organizations saying, how can we help women breastfeed? How can we help them breastfeed? And we say, oh, but not in public. Oh, not like that. Not like that. It's like, no, it's exactly like that. And, this is for us to be able to do that in a very real way.
Yeah, and I love, I totally wish I'd have had those when I was nursing. I breastfed my 3 girls, and yeah, I was the first person I knew to breastfeed. My mom didn't. I just didn't know anyone, and I joined something called the La Leche League. Mm-hmm. And I remember having my first daughter, and I had a tear when she was born. She just decided to give me one last, farewell, and I had a tear. So right away, I had to go back, and they had to fix me up. And I remember them saying, no, just give her the bottle. And they did give her one. I guess I couldn't nurse her because of what I'd had,
Mm-hmm.
But then so I had to fight for myself. And I didn't have someone there or the nurses or anyone saying, hey, it's okay, you can do it. I felt like, I was trying to be forced not to do it. So yeah. I have a heart for moms. It's already tough as it is. And I'm totally like, it's your choice, do it or don't. But if you want to, why make it any harder than it is? So sure. I love that you're doing that. I can't wait to see everything happen. And so where can they go to order or find out more information? Or they, what would be best for them to go on your Instagram or your website for updates?
Yeah, so we have two avenues right now. We have orolait.com, OROLAIT, oro meaning gold, lait meaning milk in French, because breast milk is liquid gold, and Orolait Official on Instagram.
Oh, okay, good.
Yes.
Orolait Official. Okay, well, very good. Do you want to show them? I know if you're listening to the podcast, she's going to show just a quick example.
Sure.
Here on Facebook.
So I'll describe it. So what a lot of the concern that women have when it comes to breastfeeding is the exposure, but I also know that children pull on things. So our two pieces designed to not tie, but you can actually just simply adjust it. So it is a halter because it gives us a lot more support. The material here acts as a cover-up. Because we don't want to wrestle with towels and cover-ups and all this other stuff. And if you're like JJ, he hated anything covering his body. He would take it off. So if you do need to cover up, you can cover up here. But it's a matter of lifting, and then you have a button that gives you the access that you need.
Okay.
And then you can put it right back. And then, of course, it's the same on the other side. And what I love is that it's not I'm a breastfeeding thing, because all breastfeeding things are breastfeeding things. My biggest pet peeve are these clips, for those of you that are watching online. These clips, and then they just show on everything, and you can't use it after this time period. And I think that's so frustrating, and why a lot of people then just don't buy breastfeeding specific products, because you're just like, I'll just grit it and bear it because I'm not going to use this afterwards. The bottom piece I'm actually really excited about, because like we said, it is a bikini, but not everybody's ready. So the sides actually cinch. So if you need to pull it up, it'll pull up to kind of like almost your mid-belly. But then if you tie it and bring it down, it'll be like a more bikini cut.
Yes.
So even the bottoms are adjustable, and we definitely took the material and elastic into consideration so it doesn't pinch and like cut in.
Yes.
Because that's such a terrible and uncomfortable feeling. Our one piece is an amazing classic. It's a very classic look. And again, you can't really tell what it's for, but this is just the first prototype. These elastics are hidden now, but the elastics allow the suit to stay on you, but there's an additional cinch piece right in the middle that will give you that extra support. And of course, when you go to breastfeed, you just simply open it up so you can access either side that you need, and then you close it back up. And that's it. And then you're ready to keep on going. And that's just the beginning. We have more in the works, and I'm very excited.
I am too. So, well, thank you so much for being my first guest.
Yay!
And yay, I'm excited. And I will, I did want to say too, so I'm going to start I'm going to call it the Babe, the Bare All Biz Edition. So I've had, as you and I have discussed too, even in our local community, I've had people come to me with just as from being a blogger and podcaster and a mompreneur and different things. So it's just going to be kind of bite-sized brain tips and tools I wish I'd learned along the way, my last 8 years of, blogging and this online influencer media world. So yeah, I'd love to have you on as the entrepreneur and maybe share some of your journey there. I think that would be amazing. And then I want to end. This is something we do in our family around mealtime. We do a peak and pit. So we just kind of give the peak, like highlight of our day and something that wasn't so great. So maybe just since we're talking about entrepreneurship, or maybe even your bikinis, what would you say would have been a peak and maybe a pit of that?
Well, the peak has definitely been the number of people that are willing to come out and help me. I know nothing about fashion, retail, designing, but I just reached out to people, and they were very willing to meet with me, talk with me, give me advice, and I think that that's really wonderful to rally around that. The biggest pitfall right now is speaking to a lot of investors who are behind the product but they're not ready to back it 100% simply because it's not something that they understand. And I do find that very interesting because investors being mostly men, they're saying, oh, my wife would have loved it, but because they inherently can't understand the issue, that they're not willing to back it. So I find that to be very frustrating as a woman entrepreneur.
Yes.
And so we're still plugging away at it, but it is going to be an uphill battle on that front.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you again. And for y'all listening on the podcast, you can go to my unprocessedJESS page on Facebook and start looking for the lives there. And if you haven't listened to all the episodes, you can go to start at episode 1, go forward, and we'll be coming to you every week. And have a good day. I'll talk to you soon. Love your labia. Let me know. Bye.